Welcome to another of our vlog episodes for Human Trafficking Awareness Month. My name is Melissa Ike, and I am the Director of Communications and Development for the Dragonfly Home. With me is Hallie Carr.
Hello.
Our Sex Trafficking Outreach Coordinator. And our guest for this episode is Rebecca from the Care Center.
Hey.
Rebecca, why don't you tell the people who you are and what you do at the Care Center?
Okay. So I'm Rebecca from the Care Center, and I'm the Director of Victim Services there. I supervise the unit that has forensic interviewing, family advocacy, medical care, and mental health services, as well as help coordinate the multidisciplinary team, which consists of our law enforcement, child welfare, district attorney's office, and also, again, medical and mental health professionals.
It's a big job that you do there. It's so expansive. I had the opportunity to tour your place for the first time just a couple of months ago. Yeah. And it was amazing to see the step-by-step process that's so intentional that you have set up for people who come there who need help. And then we got to sort of see how that back end of the MDT works. I mean, not really. We got to see the spaces and then hear from you all about how that all works.
Yeah, it's important. You know, whenever there's a child abuse investigation and a family walking through that, it can be very, very stressful. Yeah. And so it's important to have these kind of trauma-focused best practices going on in order to make sure this family and child heal through that process, as crazy as it sounds. If they've experienced abuse, sometimes the secondary traumatization can occur from working with the system, so to speak, you know. And so we're there to help them walk through it, learn, here's how this process works, here's what we can do for you afterwards. But then, on the back end, like you said, the multidisciplinary team is working to make sure that, no ball is dropped and nothing falls through the cracks, especially when a child chooses to disclose about abuse. They deserve that due diligence to be heard about it.
Yeah. You touched on something that we will get to later in this episode, but you already said to help people walk through that healing, because it can almost seem unimaginable that healing can be on the other side of the hardest situations. We're in that position a lot at Dragonfly, hearing about people going through really hell on earth. And then we get to see that miracle over and over again of when people get help from people who know what they're doing, have that trauma-informed response, are going to walk with people step by step, meeting them where they are all along the way, being there for the setbacks. You can really walk toward hope and a totally different outcome. We do different things, we partner and overlap, but we both get to have that tremendous opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to give people their power back a little bit too, because they've had so much taken from them, and their power, obviously this is something that happened to them that they're not okay with. And they feel that just out of controlness going on. And so to give them some autonomy, give them some decision making and part of the process, and help, co-invest back into their lives, it's just really, really powerful.
It's interesting, the themes that are already coming up. So just earlier, we were interviewing another episode with Jennifer from Pivot, and the same thing came up about introducing agency, autonomy, choice, empowerment. We're all focusing on different areas, but that's definitely a value at Dragonfly. So a key element of human trafficking is removing someone's power of choice. Because if someone is not a human being anymore, they don't need to choose anything. And so right off the bat, we're reintroducing that. And then you are doing something similar for people you serve.
Yeah, so many of these suspects, perpetrators, offenders, whatever you want to call them, they don't see children or whoever they're offending as a human with a soul, with a spirit, with a future. And so I think it's really important to give that back to them. I remember one time, like you mentioned, this is very tough work. We have, thankfully, through the Child Advocacy Centers of Oklahoma, they provide a therapist for us that we can kind of debrief with. She gets it.
Oh, good.
She used to work for DHS, now she's a therapist, and so it's really nice to call on her and she understands. But I really liked something she said about not losing hope, in that, okay, so this child went through this, they will play in the sunshine again someday. They will play with their friends, they'll ride a bike, they're going to have good days again ahead of them. This does not completely define them. And I really try to remember that.
That's really good. That's powerful.
And it's hard because sometimes we don't always see the end result. Trials, jury trials, et cetera, can take a really long time. And a variety of obstacles and things can happen in that meantime. And so it's just good to remember that this happened, but they're going to heal from it and it's okay.
Yeah. Well, it's so important to keep in mind.
And I think for us too, I feel like anybody in this work, but especially the really hard topics and subjects, I feel like that is what motivates us to keep going constantly, are the achievements that we see after. And
The
even the
healing.
fact when we're talking about like the amount of people that call us or that reach out for services, the fact that many people in the midst of probably one of the hardest situations they're dealing with, we're able to be like, nope, I trust somebody's going to help me, and pick up that phone and call. Like, we get immediately like a burst of hope. But then after all the services and collaboration and getting the correct services for somebody and honestly tangible resources for people, when we get to see the happy marriage afterwards, or they're starting a business, or they're getting this degree in some random passion that they've all of a sudden discovered that they have, like, those are the moments that for a lot of the people that we're serving, they're kind of in adulthood, so they're getting on to some of those moments. But I would imagine for you too that it's almost like just kind of waiting with hope, because they have so much ahead of them to achieve. They're not even, graduating high school yet. And so you have a whole different set of successes and achievements that you get to see also on that journey for them.
Yeah. Not to have a downer moment. I mean, after we've been on a high here.
That's what it is.
Up and down. So, but it kind of struck me when you were talking about how, you have to wait, but you're going to see it. It's so important for the support system around the child, even an adult probably, I would imagine, to be strong. It truly takes a village, and that's why with our family advocate services, we make sure to empower, also to use that word, with the family and the caretaker. I mean, they're scared too.
Sure.
A lot of time people haven't walked through something like this. They're very confused. It's a complicated system. There's a bunch of different people. And so it's important to not only empower and support that child, but the group around them, because that child needs that day-to-day caretaker to be strong, on it, give them a childhood still, but make sure and protect them every single step of the way.
That's really great. So if you want to, if you don't mind, if you could speak to your perspective on child trafficking in Oklahoma. I mean, it's a big question, so however you would feel comfortable answering it, but we know that you have encountered children who've been trafficked through your work at the care center. That's why we have partnership. And so just what's your perspective?
My concern are those are tough cases, and it's really hard because it's hard to promise the child, the victim, that they're going to be safe to talk. It's okay. They've been so massively manipulated and groomed that to convince them that you can tell me everything and you're not going to get in trouble with me. We're going to take care of you. We're going to give you a place to stay, get you back on your feet, all of these things. Because I can't promise that. I don't know what the future holds. And sometimes these perpetrators can be super powerful and super manipulative. And so it's hard for me to break that rapport or ice with them, I guess, maybe even, and convince them that it's okay to talk about something that it's been so ingrained, the force and the fear into their daily lives.
And I don't know if you have, I don't know the degree to which you all have seen this at Care Center, but you were just talking about empowering the parent or the support network, the guardian, for that holistic wraparound healing. But sometimes it's I'm sure, whether it's trafficking or something else, when that guardian is the perpetrator, that's just the hardest thing. It's just the hardest thing.
Yeah, because our parents are supposed to be that first source of love for us, right? They're supposed to emulate that in their own relationships and show us what should be a healthy, proper marriage, whatever it is. And then also show us love as children to make sure that we grow, we get our education, we're not neglected, we have food on the table, just the basic needs are covered. But also love is a basic need. I know that sounds maybe kind of hokey, but it's true. It's part of the psyche, it's part of growing up. And so when you're not given that support and love from a caretaker that was literally your designated person, then you're going to seek it in other places. And so it's very concerning when we have caretakers that maybe DHS for whatever reason doesn't have enough to move forward with removing that child from their home. I'm not saying that's always the best step or advocating for that. I get it. I know it's important to keep families together. But I feel like we need to think 5-10 years down the road of what this child's going to need. So sure, they had this thing happen to them, but if they aren't given the proper care, it's I don't want to say burden, that's maybe not quite the word, but it's an impact on society 5 to 10 years later. We have substance abuse, we have homelessness, we have additional crime, domestic violence, things like that start to pop up in this child's life, that if we would have backtracked 5 to 10 years ago and properly intervened and properly helped them, we could have maybe stopped another generation of violence.
Yeah. I see a lot of overlap there with trafficking as well. So people like to talk a lot about trafficking prevention, and of course that's hugely important. It's a lot of what Hallie does. Hallie's going out into the community constantly, educating about trafficking, and there's a lot of prevention that can come from that. But people also, I think what they miss is by providing direct care services to someone who's already experienced trafficking, for example, you also prevent trafficking. You prevent that future victimization, or you prevent those other issues that you're talking about down the road when you can get that intervention in, when you have that opportunity, and like break that cycle. There again, a lot of the people we're working with are adults. When we work with children, we will serve people ages 15 and up who've experienced trafficking. A lot of the kiddos we're working with are the children of trafficking survivors. And so that holistic approach, though, that is another way to prevent trafficking. So by this person who is an adult who's experienced that, when they get help, it can also break the cycle for their kids. But it is about getting that person into those services and so that they can access it.
Well, and we could probably do a whole other podcast on the mental health system in Oklahoma. It is in chaos. I don't want to be as alarmist, but we need help.
What it is.
We need big help. We have lots of people on massive waiting lists, 6 months to a year. And really, when a person reaches out and asks for help, the time to engage them is right then. And not a good job. You did the right thing asking for help. We'll see you maybe in 8 months. No, you need to snatch them up right then. Sorry, probably a bad phrase to use when talking about trafficking.
In a good way.
Yeah.
With good things.
Sorry about that.
That they've already chosen.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of that collaborative effort too, and especially with reaching youth, whether it be prevention or after a crime of trafficking is happening, in terms of getting them to services. For us, we're serving people 15 and older, and a lot of the times we're serving the children of survivors. But most people that are in trafficking were introduced to trafficking the ages of anywhere from 12 to 16. So that's the age group that are actually being exploited, actually being groomed, actually experiencing this. I mean, trafficking is universal, goes across every age. But that is such a prime group for traffickers to want to recruit or groom people. And so we're not going to see people at that stage, because more than likely they have no idea that's trafficking. But they may realize that what they're experiencing is some type of abuse, or that they're a part of a crime, or that something else has happened that gets them in contact with you guys.
That's right.
That then allows your education of trafficking, the referral of services to happen. But I think that highlights why that collaboration is so important, because you're seeing the people we wouldn't. And vice versa, just from their life experiences, the paths they're now going on. I think it helps us really cover all the ages and all people that could be impacted by trafficking.
Or at least making progress toward it. So can you speak a little bit to how Dragonfly and Care Center have partnered, kind of going off of what Hallie was saying?
Well, yeah, we collaborate on services. I certainly seek you guys out for your information. You're the experts, and you're more knowledgeable than I am. I can forensically interview a trafficking victim,
for sure.
But as far as all the wraparound stuff, we come together on that.
Right.
And I welcome any sort of questions that I get from staff at Dragonfly, which happens from time to time, especially when they're working with parents that have small children and they have their own situation going on there. So I think we are our deficits, work with each other. Like we work a lot with DHS, we work a lot with kind of the child welfare juvenile system, and so our expertise in that can help coexist with your knowledge on just maybe identifying and preventing as well. You said something just a minute ago that kind of piqued my interest about how it would be a really smart thing for us to maybe, if there's some sort of assessment tool or something that we could look at a lethality assessment of sorts, to start kind of screening a little bit these 12 to 16-year-olds or even younger.
And that's, we just, in our earlier conversation, that was part of it, was discussing like how do you have that conversation and ask these questions. And we've made posters before with self-screening questions, and that's always what it comes down to, is how do you word that and how do you get people to understand? Because if we ask somebody, have you ever been trafficked? If we were to ask that on our hotline, they were going to say no. More than likely, every call is going to be like, no, I've never been trafficked, but I'm calling the trafficking helpline. Right. But if we were to ask, have you ever had to do this to stay somewhere? Have you ever had to do this for food? Has anybody ever made you feel this way? Tapping into their actual experiences, I think, is really how we're going to discover that, is through asking the conversations and language that they know already.
Yeah, I think there's a misconception about, trafficking is not exploitation or vice versa, you know what I mean? And so it's like the exploitation that's going on. People don't recognize that as trafficking. And so I think it's education and realizing, like you said, are you having to do this for food or to stay somewhere or go door to door for sales or whatever, it may be.
That's right.
A lot of people don't think about all those little tiny things.
Well, we mentioned this in a prior episode, but I'm going to bring it up again. One thing that Hallie developed this year is a youth brochure. And in that brochure, there's information like definitions of trafficking, common misconceptions. We're really starting to recognize more labor trafficking of kids than we realized. And that can happen within families. Kiddos maybe being pulled out of school to work at fast food all day long and then turning that money over. But then I think the part that has stood out to us all the most is the famous thing that Hallie's mom invented that we all now benefit from, which is this idea of charming or alarming. And so these behaviors of people who are grooming kids or adults, can look different ways, but behaviors that can seem really cool when you're a kid, like showering with affection or gifts or attention, possessiveness, things that adults might be like, nope, stay away, but they're really effective recruitment tools. And I could see that maybe even being a form of screening questions. Has anybody ever given you like really expensive gifts? That'd be interesting to talk about.
The nuance of it. And I know in interviewing a lot, we're starting to talk about grooming and ask about grooming. And talk to the parents about that. And you can see their ears perk up and they're like, I never thought of that. But they got an iPad and I didn't buy that for them.
Wow. So you're seeing this.
Oh, yeah, big time. Grooming is a major, major component to child abuse. And so if you get a kid that is used to that, I guess, maybe, and that's how they're getting attention and affection, like you mentioned, and then it starts to become but they didn't cross the line with me. Well, tell me more about the conversation that you guys have. Well, he's just telling me how to kiss. Okay. And so we start getting into it, you know what I mean?
Lowering the inhibitions. Right. That's something that we see a lot with trafficking as well.
Yeah, lower ambitions, gain their trust. Not only that, but gain the trust of the people around them so that they do turn, not a blind eye, but they start to go, no, he's a good guy, he's fine. Like you were mentioning earlier with someone that should probably know what to look out for, they could be completely bamboozled by all of it. They're expert manipulators.
Manipulators. Oh my gosh. It's so enraging. I've been doing this for, you've been, would you say 15, 16 years at the care center?
11 at the care center. Long story short, 16. Yeah.
Gotcha. Long story short, 16 years. I've been doing this for 11, and there are certain things I'm sure you understand, kind of like I'm used to talking about, but when we talk about the expert manipulation, it will never not make me completely angry.
Yeah.
It's just so insidious and it's disgusting.
It takes a certain level of human.
Takes a certain level of human to do that. I like
not a good level. Yeah.
Right.
Which, and I think that's a big part of when we're talking about like overlapping and vulnerabilities. That is where I think sometimes people get confused that child abuse in itself is a vulnerability. Having ever experienced child
That's
abuse in and itself is a vulnerability to trafficking, because traffickers' manipulation and control tactics are so similar.
Yeah.
They know the ways that an abuser would work, especially anything with child sexual abuse. Once that part of sex has already been somewhat normalized for the child, that becomes so much easier for a trafficker to then sell it as a way to make money.
Absolutely.
And so there's so many layers of that overlap. I just think that maybe that's a big point that sometimes people miss, is that there are all these vulnerabilities that lead to child abuse, but child abuse itself then opens up being a vulnerability to a lot of other victimizations.
I was in a Dragonfly training actually, and it was Whitney who said there was a 95% correlation rate between childhood sexual abuse and trafficking. I was shooketh. I was just like, oh my God, it made me worry so bad, because I was like, oh my gosh, are we making sure that we pour into these kids enough that they're not going to just continue this trajectory? Of course, it's not their fault. That sounded a little victim blaming, which I don't mean at all. But that made me really take pause.
Yeah. It's about, well, when you recognize that, it's like, what can we do to prevent that, to sow that value back into someone that's been stripped of that, and help them achieve healing? Because traffickers look for any opportunity to, what we say is they can size someone up very quickly and identify exactly and pinpoint the exact need that someone has. But that's why the early intervention is so crucial. So we need the care center, through all the things that you're doing, you are providing that chance at intervention, probably many, many times over for the same person.
Well, we have the investigations that occur there. You know, we do the forensic interviewing, things like that. But going even further, yes, we have an education department who goes and teaches out in the public schools. And so we wrote a book, Rex Finds His Roar.
It's amazing.
It's really great. And it's appropriate for like 4 to 8 year olds. So yeah,
or
catching them early.
Older, because I enjoyed it tremendously.
Yeah, and you know, well, it sounds like you know the story. Rex, he's a lion, and he's lost his roar because something happened to him that was not okay. And so he goes and finds his roar back through the support of his friends.
Yeah.
And we educate about privates are private, who are some safe people in your life.
Yeah.
I got to watch one the other day. I've been there all this time, and I just went to her war last week, I think it was. And we do it in Spanish also, which was great. I could see some kids like really perk up when she started speaking in Spanish. And so,
cool.
we're trying. Yeah, we try to make sure and be very accommodating. All are welcome there. We respect and affirm LGBTQ. And so it's just, we make sure that when you walk in there, you feel safe and that you're going to be listened to, and that, you know, you're going to be empowered.
So interesting, because a little behind the scenes, you're our third interview today, and I think that has come up in every single one. Safe space, no judgment, you will be heard. And that's why we partner. I mean, it's no surprise now that I'm putting it together. That's why we partner with people like you, organizations like the Care Center, because that's what it takes. That's truly what it takes.
Absolutely.
To
Yeah,
help
people
people.
need that. You know, it's very scary walking through this stuff.
Yeah. Oh,
No, I was just thinking, I mean, I'm an adjunct professor also at OCU, and the class I'm teaching next year is global child advocacy. And so it talks about the labor trafficking and the human trafficking and stuff like that. And, you know, it's an international problem. And so it's not unique to Oklahoma. And I'm just really glad that places like you exist. And I know that you're probably overwhelmed with work and need more help, but...
yes.
Yeah.
But, oh well, you know, like we
Yeah,
press
yeah.
on, just like, I mean, I think almost anybody who gets into something like this just recognizes the need because there's so much more that can always be done.
Yeah,
But, so I was wondering if you wouldn't mind taking a couple minutes to explain what forensic interviewing is. It just occurred to me, you've mentioned it a few times, but until I got involved in this cause and with Dragonfly, it was not something that I think I remember hearing about it like in law school, but I didn't pursue criminal justice. That was not my aim. Obviously, I'm doing this. But I did not have like a real understanding of it. And it was really cool to learn about more in depth with you guys.
Okay. Yeah, forensic interviewing has only really been around since like maybe about the 80s.
Really?
It was learned, that questioning children about abusive events. If you ask leading questions, suggestible questions, they're going to give you the answers that you want to hear. Children are very easily led and they're easily suggestible. So therefore, it made it not court defensible. So this practice was developed with protocols. There's several nationwide, but they're really all about the same. But anyways, first what you do is you just kind of spend some time breaking the ice with the child, building rapport. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about, do you have pets? Tell me about school, things like that. Tell me about your family. And then you transition to the topic of concern. Backing up a little bit while we're building rapport, we let them know that it's okay to say, I don't know, I don't remember. It's okay to correct the interviewer if they get something wrong. Because, children are taught, don't correct me. This is a different conversation with an adult. Right. We point out the cameras, let them know that there's observers. It's audio and video recorded. And then we do kind of just like a child-friendly oath. We just say, in this room, it's important to tell the truth. Younger kids, I'll say, no pretend, no make-believe. I promise to tell you the truth. Will you tell me the truth today?
Okay.
And yes, no. Some kids say no, and you deal with that in your own way. But then, yes, you transition to the topic of concern. And if they disclose, again, we're very child-led. We're not going to put words into their mouth. We're not going to make them talk about something. But if they choose to disclose, we'll gather as much who, what, where, when, all those kind of contextual details about the allegation. Based on development, of course. We can't question a 3-year-old the same way we question a 15-year-old. But it's audio and video recorded. Their investigators are watching. It has to be a reported incident. So like we couldn't take a phone call from a concerned parent or teacher or counselor even. It has to be reported. We're not there to just fish around. If we're there, it's an investigative interview. We're there for the purpose of gathering facts and information about an allegation.
For law enforcement.
Or DHS.
Got it. Okay.
And then that, like I said, it's audio and video recorded. That recording is then sent to the district attorney's office should they pursue charges. And then it's used for the purposes of court. So later, if it reaches to the jury trial time, it will be shown in court to the jury, which is great because sometimes, as I mentioned, these trials can take years. I mean, I've had a case that took like 7 years, I think was the longest. And I'll remember he was an 11-year-old boy when I interviewed him, and he was very scared and very quiet spoken and very upset about what happened to him. But by the time it got to jury trial, he's an 18-year-old giant dude.
Sure.
And people are like, you're not a victim.
Doesn't look vulnerable like a little kid anymore.
So to be able those recordings are so valuable.
Yeah, they got to see him at the moment of disclosure, which was really, really helpful. Yeah. And I was actually in training yesterday, and the district attorney mentioned that when they poll the jury, they often say that the forensic interview was the most helpful part of the evidence that was laid out.
And then I also want to point out, because you've mentioned a couple of times in here, MDT or multidisciplinary team. And I think that it would be interesting. It was super interesting for me to hear. So you were in the forensic interview, you mentioned that you say to the child you're interviewing, there are observers, and that's that multidisciplinary team.
But the investigators, it would just be law enforcement or DHS or medical, if they need to be there. We don't allow attorneys to watch just because we don't want them to influence the interviewer. Yeah. I need this, I need that, well, that didn't come up organically in our conversation, so I can't go there. But, the purpose of that is because we want to reduce the duplication of interviews that occurred with this child. First of all, that's traumatizing to have to talk about this over and over and over again. And that's when one of the premises that started child advocacy centers is that, again, about in the 80s. So maybe a child told their teacher, who made them tell the principal, who made them tell the counselor, who made them tell the police, who made them tell the doctor, who made them tell, And so by the time they get to this 7th person, they're exhausted, they're traumatized, they're like, forget it, I don't want to deal with this or go through this anymore. I made it up, or something like that. So we help reduce that duplicate interview. Also, it's more defensible because if they sit down with a trained interviewer who asks appropriate questioning, it can be just help reduce corroboration issues, So the example, like when I'm testifying and I'm asked about this in court, is like if I asked you what you had for dinner last night, then I asked you again, 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 and I phrase my question in a different way each time, making you remember different things, then the defense is going to be like, well, they're lying because they're inconsistent. Yeah. But it doesn't mean you were lying about having dinner last night. It just was based on the quality of my questions. Yes, so the multidisciplinary team in Oklahoma County consists of the district attorney's office, law enforcement, whether that be local, state, or federal. And then we've got Oklahoma County child welfare units, children's hospital, mental health professionals. And one of the things that I really like that we do is something called case review. So whenever the child discloses at the care center, about 60 days, 90 days later, we'll review the case just to make sure nothing fell through the cracks. This child chose to disclose. We're going to make sure they had their due diligence and everyone did what they needed to do. That's where DHS, law enforcement, DA's office sits at the table and DHS says, I did this, law enforcement, I did that. DA says, okay, how about we talk to this person again? Again, it's just a really good checks and balances.
Yeah. One of the things during the tour that I thought was super cool is having a number of people from different disciplines observing the interview. I heard a story that law enforcement was kind of like, this interview is a little bit of a dead end. I don't know, we're not really getting anything more from it. And then someone asked something that caught the medical provider's attention, and now were they able to tell the forensic interview, like, hey, maybe go this direction? Are they communicating with the interviewer?
Not live, but the interviewer will step out before closing the interview.
Maybe that's what happened. Yeah. Anyway, someone with a different discipline might hear something that someone from another discipline would not even know was anything remarkable at all, and it opened up a whole new vein of investigative possibilities. And I really love thoroughness. And when you've got people out here thinking that they can really get away with something truly heinous, and then other people are out here figuring out ways to say, no, you can't actually. You can't just get away with it. Yeah. Now, that's something I really like to happen in this world.
Absolutely. Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I got to be neutral. I'm not being biased. I stay in my lane when I'm an interviewer. But yeah, it's really nice to see the end result sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess we can end that. We're kind of moving in this direction. And on this idea of how much hope there really is to be had. In our interview, our conversation we had with Jennifer from Pivot, we were talking about pathways to hope and walking alongside someone on those pathways. And people can experience such hard things, but when they can be met with the safe space and the no judgment and the no strings attached and someone who just wants to listen and truly hear what's going on, that can change the whole story for the positive. You're helping people get justice. You're helping people gain healing. I don't know. What do you have to say about hope?
It matters.
Yeah.
And it's an important part of recovery. It's an important part of moving forward with your life. I just really hope that the people we work with don't use this as a way to give up, because there is still so much life to be had and be given. And the process can be difficult, but there's that kind of undeniable spirit that we all have within us that's important to keep flickering, And so I hope that, and actually we did something called the Hope Initiative, where we surveyed people after leaving our center, and how were you feeling walking in? How are you feeling walking out? Right. Where's your hope at? Overwhelmingly, it was close to 100% of people felt hope when they left the center.
I love it. We do something similar. We do like regular surveys of people, and we incorporated that hopefulness piece in there. And it's things like, do you feel like you were listened to without judgment? Yeah. Do you feel like your advocates care about you? Do you feel like there is hope to be had? Same. Yeah. It's like that near 100% success. It's like those are the things that keeps, like how you said it, keeping that flicker alive. Sometimes it can get real dim, but when we have people around us to help, maybe we like share a little bit of our candle or something, or like breathe life into that. It's critical, because I'm sure you experience this as well. People that we serve at Dragonfly, It's not like, okay, you're out of trafficking. Great.
Yeah.
Everything's fine now. Off you go. Pull
Yeah.
yourself up by your bootstraps. No, that's not reality.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of barriers that can come up as someone is walking toward healing and building a new life. And so having people like at the Care Center, at Dragonfly, also us working with each other alongside can keep that hope going and keep someone moving forward so that what happened to them doesn't define the future.
Right. Yeah, this doesn't define them. And we just need to not give up on people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Except for maybe the people who do it.
Well, that's a whole other story for a
Yeah.
whole other podcast episode. And I would be fine to discuss that with you further.
Yeah.
So if there are people that want to reach out, like in the community, maybe for education or resources, or they've experienced something or have a child who has, what are the ways that people contact Care Center, get in touch with you guys to do that?
Best way, we have a great informative website, and so that's carecenter-okc.org. You can safely exit to if necessary, but that provides not only, so maybe you have an appointment at the Care Center, we have a step-by-step, here's what your day is going to look like. And then we also have, staff or information out there, our phone numbers listed, our address, things like that. And so, yeah, we field calls all day long about, here's my concern, how do I make a DHS report? What do I do about law enforcement? We are happy to help with that information.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Okay. Well, if you need to reach out to Dragonfly, you can visit the dragonflyhome.org. Our 24-hour human trafficking helpline is 405-212-3377. And Rebecca, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Enjoyed the
Thank you,
conversation
guys.
tremendously.
Yeah.